I assure you that the dead continue to live and remain themselves. When I lived among the other living on earth, I could not give such assurances. But now the circumstances in which I find myself allow me to do so," was one of the first posthumous messages from Arthur Conan Doyle. The first posthumous message from Arthur Conan Doyle was received by medium Grace Cook 6 months after his death, on the 27th of January, 1931. Messages from the writer were received over the next 18 months and were included in a book called A Posthumous Message to Mankind. According to Conan Doyle, he went out to contact his friends and relatives in order to put an end to the research he had begun during his lifetime. It must be said that during his lifetime for many years the writer refused to believe in the existence of the immaterial world. In 1882 he received a medical education and, like many doctors, was a convinced materialist. About that time, Arthur Conan Doyle recalled as follows: "When I read stories about people who communicate with the souls of the dead, I always wondered how a man in his right mind could sincerely believe in all this. I always looked upon the subject of the existence of souls and communication with them as the greatest folly." Conan Doyle abandoned his materialistic views when his works had already brought him world fame. In 1916, the writer wrote an article in which he declared his belief in communication with the dead. By this time, Conan Doyle had already been to dozens of séances with mediums who received such messages. For his strange new hobby, Conan Doyle was ridiculed by his acquaintances and even lost a few good friends, among them, for example, the illusionist Harry Houdini. The views of Houdini and Conan Doyle differed in many ways, but this did not interfere with their friendship for some time. The writer once told Houdini that he thought he was a powerful clairvoyant. Conan Doyle was convinced that the illusionist would not have been able to demonstrate his tricks if he did not have supernatural abilities. According to the writer, Houdini did not want to recognize his abilities because of his stubbornness. However, this incident was not the end of their friendship. Conan Doyle once invited Houdini to a séance with the illusionist's deceased mother. The séance was attended by Jean Leckie, Arthur's wife, who believed she had the ability to communicate with souls. During this séance, Jean Leckie wrote 15 pages. She claimed that her hand was being guided by Cecilia, Houdini's mother. Upon seeing the message, the illusionist was outraged that it was written in English, although his mother had never known the language. Houdini stated that people like Jean Leckie were merely profiting from other people's grief. The writer and his wife were offended by this statement and never hosted Houdini again. From the books A Posthumous Message to Mankind, those studies of the other world, which I conducted during my earthly life, helped me to get used to the idea that in the spiritual world everything is easy and simple. Indeed, I enjoyed painting pleasant pictures of the afterlife. I wouldn't want to diminish the faith and hope of others in the slightest, but I would like to give a clearer idea of the state we move to when we leave the physical body. Because everything I experienced after the end of my earthly life was different from what I expected. In his posthumous messages, Conan Doyle described in detail his state after the end of earthly life. According to the writer, he knew a lot and was ready for this transition, but being in a new state, he felt only his helplessness and uncertainty. Having left my earthly body, for quite a long time I was incomprehensibly connected with the place where I was born and lived my early years. I was unable to leave this place and begin my journey to the celestial level of which I was aware. I tried to make contact with my earthly friends, but this proved to be an extremely difficult task. At least my endeavors gave assurance to my loved ones that I continued to exist, Conan Doyle reported in his posthumous messages. For some time Conan Doyle was in a state of helplessness. According to the writer, after death, every soul must live through this period. And how long or short it will be depends on the mental state of the person at the moment when he leaves his earthly body. For some people this period lasts from a few hours or days, while for others it may last for years. Conan Doyle reported that at this moment the soul is in the belt, which is the lower astral world and dense astral matter. This world is inhabited by the suffering souls of men. Here the soul remains until it is rid of its physical and mental attachments. Only an enlightened soul passes quickly through this belt. From this world it is drawn after it by some unknown force. It seemed to me that this force was like a ray of light. Crossing the grey astral worlds, I threw off my astral body and entered the celestial life, Conan Doyle reported in his posthumous message. It is a fact that by passing through the so-called astral level, we leave our astral shell in which our soul was formerly clothed. This shell remains in the astral world, for which we also die in order to be resurrected for the true spiritual life. A large percentage of those living in the spiritual world have not the slightest desire to return to the earthly level, because they are not interested in its progress, nor in the people they left there. It is therefore not for everyone to seek or attempt by force to establish a connection between the so-called dead and the living. According to Conan Doyle, the netherworld consists of 13 levels, 7 astral and 6 celestial. The lower levels are inhabited by souls who have spent their lives loving only themselves and their desires. On the lower levels there is a grayness that resembles a foggy November morning. In this dense fog one can see rare stunted trees. The more the soul strives for light, the stronger its desire to do something for its neighbor, the higher the level it rises to. The higher the level, the more beautiful the landscape and more favorable the conditions for existence. At the highest levels the soul abides in eternal summer. The last 6th level represents a stopover for the soul where it contemplates and reflects on the lived experience. It is a resting place before the soul returns back to earth for a new experience. The soul, finally freed from incarnations, passes into cosmic consciousness, Conan Doyle reported.